You are Locked On Mammoth, your daily podcast on the Utah Mammoth, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into this live edition of Locked On Mammoth. I'm veteran NHL voice Tom Callahan, joined by longtime team analyst Robyn Leano. Thank you so much for making us your first listen each and every single day when it comes to the Utah Mammoth, and a special live edition as we break down the J.J. Peterka to Utah trade here today. And Robyn, you and I wanted to wait until we had heard from GM Bill Armstrong. We were at his media availability earlier today, so we've got his side of things now too, and we can really dig in.
We really can, and all I gotta say, Tom, is it's an amazing day to be a Utah Mammoth fan. What a trade this was! What a night it was last night, right? I feel like a lot of people were winding down, kind of getting ready for bed, or getting ready for whatever it needed to do for the rest of the night. And was it Frank Saravalli who initially started poking, like, hey, this is happening, and things unrolled quite quickly after that.
My friends in the Buffalo media were annoyed because it was happening after midnight for them. It came down pretty late, but I had a chance to chat with some of the folks over there. So we're going to go over not only the upside, but also the potential shortcomings of J.J. Peterka, talk about the value of the trade. I know we've had quite a few comments, Robyn, going both ways. I think a lot of what I've seen and felt from fans is the feeling that their heart is still kind of in this. You know what I mean? As opposed to kind of the business detachment that we kind of have in the media sometimes. So we're definitely going to speak to that as well. But Robyn, your initial thoughts?
I absolutely love this trade. I mean, you and I have been talking about J.J. Peterka for quite a while, right? I mean, it really initially started. I mean, you put the implant in my head. I wasn't even thinking about it at the moment because I never think about offer sheets, right? I mean, I do, but they're in the back of my head, and I'm like, I don't think about it until I want to think about them. But then we challenged it. We're like, okay, who is a player who Utah can go for an offer sheet? Who would go like that? J.J. Peterka was like, you're first on the list. I looked at his numbers and looked at it, and I'm like, you know what? You'd be an amazing addition. Someone who could really work well in the top 6 for the Utah Mammoth. That's the little key right there, because a top 6 player is what the Utah Mammoth needed. So I was thinking, okay, we'll see what happens. Maybe an offer sheet is on the table, but if we can go for a trade for J.J. Peterka, that would be huge. I don't know if Buffalo would go for it, but it'd be huge. Fast forward to where we now are today, and they did. And like I said, we're going to get into the value about it, but I think it's a huge win for Bill Armstrong on being able to swing a deal like this.
So let's get into who is J.J. Peterka. 23 years old, was set to potentially be trouble for the Sabres, quite honestly. Didn't want to be there. A lot of players don't want to be in Buffalo right now. It's a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 14 years. Their leadership in the front office has been questioned by everyone there. And again, I have a lot of friends in that Buffalo media, and it's a tough slog, and fans are disillusioned. It's a difficult place to be right now and want to play, even though the community's great. It's just a hard locker room. And so Peterka at 23 was vocal about wanting out of there and now gets out. So what does he bring to the table? Had a breakout season this year, was creeping up on 70 points. And a lot of people say, well, Peterka got a lot of his points at garbage time and down the stretch and whatever. And that doesn't concern me, because most of the season was kind of garbage time for Buffalo. There was very few points to that season where they felt like they were in it. And Peterka gives you a power play one-time specialist. He is the guy now who's going to set up on the off wing. You're going to try to feed him the puck. And he's another guy who can shoot. So now you've got a Gunther who can shoot. You've got a Peterka who can shoot. You've got a Sergachev who can shoot. That's all on your top power play. Plus you got a Keller who can distribute and a Cooley who can distribute, but they can also shoot. And for as many times, Robyn, as you and I complain about the power play not being clutch. Not that they were bad, but they just weren't clutch. They didn't give you that big clutch goal. This is a huge difference.
It is a huge difference. And I kind of want to point out something that you talked about, that kind of adding a player like J.J. Peterka in that and the scoring ability that he has and his ability to get points on the board. And the Utah Mammoth PR tweeted about it, right? Once it happened, says the Utah Mammoth now have 4 forwards with above 60 points seasons, which to me, I didn't think about, like, oh my God, I can't remember the last time I was covering a team that had 4 forwards above 60 points. And like, it's crazy because you don't think about it until a stat like that gets thrown your way. Like, oh my God, they're moving places now.
Yeah, they're an offensive threat, and that was a big part of it. The Mammoth, they were kind of an odd team last year, weren't they? Because they would go in waves. They would be invincible and unbeatable for a game or 2 or 3, and then they would look like they had never played before for a couple of games. And there are probably other reasons for that you and I talked about during the season, and I'm sure we'll talk about later this summer. But what you get in Peterka, Robyn, is the chance to bolster your top 6, maybe even your top line. And we're going to talk about lines later. We've got some projections for you. And plus, I think the other thing that people kind of look past in this when you're acquiring a player like a JJ Peterka is it makes the top 6 better, but the middle 6 better and the bottom 6 better. Because now everybody's redistributed. There's yet another threat for scoring out there. And I think it makes the entire team more difficult to play against, because how do you defend them?
It really is that way. And I gotta say, like, I think just in that instant thought too, you think of all the potential good things that this team can do. And you also make the question too, and again, we'll kind of dive into some more thoughts too, was this the quote big splash everyone was saying Utah would do, or is there more? That's the question now, right? Is there more?
And that was a question we did ask of Bill Armstrong. Speaking of questions, by the way, keep throwing your questions in the chat. I see those. We're going to hit some of those in the next segment here as we talk a little bit more about what's going on JJ Peterka to Utah. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what Bill Armstrong had to say, talking about bringing Peterka into the top 6. He expects it's going to take him a little time to grow into the system. Number 1 being 23, still developing, but already having that much talent. But it sounded like he was giving him some leeway to figure out how to play in that Utah system. So maybe the impact, it's almost like we were being told, hey, if he doesn't come in and light the world on fire right away, let's not get crazy here, because it's going to take him some time to learn what he needs to do. And so I think there's that little bit of tempering and cautioning from Bill Armstrong. But Robyn, there's going to be expectations on JJ Peterka that he's going to jump right in and be able to make some kind of impact here.
There will be some pretty high expectations. And I think that there will be and I don't call them a small group of fans, because these are the ones who I like to call these fans, and it's no offense to these kinds of fans, but the doomsday kinds of fans, where they look and within let's say 10 games or so, he's not performing as what they thought he would. They start hitting the panic button and they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? I don't think that will happen. I don't think we'll have to go through a doomsday scenario like that, but we just remember that it will take a little bit of time, especially when you're going from 2 different kinds of systems.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about Kesselring and Doan coming up. Like I said, we're going to get to your questions here in just a second. I've also got a couple other things I want to tell you about that Bill Armstrong said just a couple hours ago in his media availability. We're going to talk about that. And then to talk about the potential change to the draft strategy, which was also addressed at today's press conference. So stay tuned. We got more Locked On Mammoth. And today's show is brought to you in part by Monarch Money. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning on a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's also a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Quite frankly, that is my favorite thing about Monarch Money. look, I know we all have one, if not two, maybe three bank accounts going on. If you have a retirement account or if you have an investment account, you're trying to track that too. Then you got your credit cards and you're trying to keep tabs on all of that, plus other, revolving credit that you may have, store cards. Monarch makes it so much easier. Monarch Money just puts it all right in front of you. And that is my favorite thing, because now I don't have to open 300 different apps to track what's going on. It makes it a lot easier to see what's going on with the budget, to see where my money is going, and to put that money to work better for me. And it just helps me keep track of things. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, Tom Callahan, Robyn Leano here with us. Hey, if you're still here, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. Plus, you get all kinds of great content like this. Thanks to everybody jumping in on this live. We're going to get to some questions here, and then I want to talk a little bit more about what Bill Armstrong had to say today. But Robyn, kind of going through here, the very first one from Wesley a little bit earlier said, I find the size of the top six a little concerning. Do we? What do you think?
That's a good question. I think especially too when you consider what the ideal kind of team that Bill Armstrong has been trying to build, right? We've been talking about size and physicality and kind of that more power forward identity, and this top six is becoming more like closer to that skill level base. They're a lot of them are a little bit smaller. You look at Logan Cooley's size, look at Clayton Keller's size. Peterka, I think he's not small by any means. He's not undersized, but he's not huge. So I don't think it's really concerning considering that they're skill players. That's kind of what they're built for. That's what they're kind of in there for. There still is room for Bill Armstrong's type, but you fit that in where you can.
And that's nothing saying that archetype doesn't continue to evolve. If you can get a skilled player who can play in today's NHL, you get that player. It's the same thing with the philosophy about drafting the best available player. I think that's the way you do it. And speaking of which, I wanted to highlight this comment by Matthew. In all seriousness, does obtaining Peterka without losing draft assets and being fortunate with the fourth overall slightly speed up the rebuild? You know what? That is a good question. I think, to me, the rebuild this season is playoffs, right? This is the next phase we're getting into. You need to be competing for a playoff spot, and ideally you're in one. Once you're in the playoffs, obviously anything can happen, but this team is 2, 3, 4 years away from that really Stanley Cup contention. But once they start to get into that window and these younger players are growing, Robyn, does Peterka speed up that window for you?
I think he definitely gives an extra push. Speeding up is a really hard term because, again, we need to see him on the ice. We need to see that kind of level. But we still have that expectation, like we talked about. He's going to be a top six forward. That's kind of where we have him. So we're going to get into projected lines in a little bit. But going back to that original question is where it gets to not having to give up the fourth overall draft pick. To me, Tom, I just think that overall that's huge, right? Because Utah can still either use that as an asset to still trade if they want to, right? Rather trade up or down and use that to kind of bring somebody else in, or they can draft somebody who can kind of continue that process, who can be ready in 3, 4, 5 years and can kind of continue the legacy and can keep this going, not at this point, it's not going to be the rebuild, but just keep the idea of what this team is going to be for a few more years.
And so I think last question for now, but we will take more. So if you have more, please put them in there. But Oscar saying, would taking Higgins at number 4 and worry about size later be a good move? I think that, look, if you can find a number 1 center and you believe whoever you pick can be your number 1 center, those guys don't grow on trees.
They don't. No, they really don't. And I think that's an interesting question though about James Higgins though, is because as we talked about already with the top 6 where it is a little bit undersized. I do think, Tom, that there is to at least to me, and again, this is my perspective, of maybe that's not the kind of player that they're going to go after at the 4th overall pick. I'd love to have James Higgins on this team. Don't get me wrong. But to me, it's thinking more in my head, maybe they're going to go more after a player like a Caleb Desnoyers, because they do want to bring in that size. They do want to balance it out. Bill Armstrong's been good about that. He's been really good about balancing it.
You got shooters, you need passers. But, it's nice to have the mix and to have guys who are capable of doing both. Speaking of what Bill Armstrong had to say, it was interesting. Part of the things he said today, Robyn, he said he's not inclined to go, and he keeps throwing out this figure of $15 million. Do not expect Utah to go out and break the bank. So clearly, I think $15 million is aimed at Tom. I'm not going to go get you Mitch Marner. It's like, okay, Bill. All right, I understand. I can't imagine if Mitch Marner goes for $15 million. Woo. Holy cow, that's nuts. But it could happen. And so that's not the kind of player they're going to go after. They are still going to look in free agency. But here's the other thing that Bill Armstrong said today that grabbed me was, we will also look to move around at the draft. We will see if we can bring in more players, because I basically the question I had asked was, getting this done ahead of free agency, this trade for Peterka, does that change the focus in free agency? And of course, his kind of non-answer answer was, well, we're worried about the draft. But then he said, we're still going to look to acquire players at the draft if it makes sense. So, Robyn, they may not be done trading yet before free agency.
No, and that's it. And you know what, Tom? That is just the amazing way that Bill Armstrong operates, right? Sometimes we don't know, and sometimes they just come out as surprise like this. And we took a look at what Bill Armstrong did during the draft last year. We remember that. I talked about it earlier this week. In day 2 of the draft, Bill Armstrong used some of the picks flexibility plus some prospects and was able to acquire Mikhail Sergachev and John Marino. Those were 2 big trades in one day. We just had one couple of days before the draft. So there are a lot of different ways we can look at that.
So I don't think it necessarily changes their focus of the draft if they have the pick. And I've said this for the last couple of weeks. You won't know until they step to the microphone at number 4 if they're going to make number 4. But if they do, they'll pick the best player available. But after number 3, if the phone blows up and something comes across that they like, they'll make a move. And that's the interesting part to me is can you imagine further bolstering this team with that number 4 pick, still coming away with the first rounder? I'm going to say it. The Buffalo Sabres have said number 9's on the table. What would it take to get Tage Thompson and number 9?
That's an interesting thought process. And especially now knowing that, again, going back to what we talked about earlier in this show, is Utah not having to give up the 4th overall to get JJ Peterka. Now it adds a little bit more to Bill Armstrong's arsenal, adds to the ability that now he has more flexibility. 44
goals in the lineup would not hurt my feelings. That was Tage Thompson. 44 goals. So we'll see. Matthew's like, say it, Tom, say it. Hey, man, I'm making that trade. If I can. But here's the thing. So we're going to take a look at lines, because with Peterka in, this creates some interesting depth. I don't want to say problems. It's not a problem. It's a nice problem to have. But it's going to shift some guys around. Plus, we are going to talk about Kesselring and Doan, because a lot of you had asked us before the show about, okay, what are we really giving up here? So we're going to analyze that side of it as well on Locked On Mammoth.
And today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking to try something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in about 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If additional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head over Rugiet.com FanDuel.com/LockedOnNHL. Use the code LockedOnNHL and get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL. Use the promo code LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Visit the Rugiet website for full safety information.
So I'm Callahan, Robyn Leano here with you. Hey, thanks for sticking with us through the special live version of Locked on Mammoth. And if you're on the YouTube side, you're watching this on YouTube, hit that thumbs up right now. Helps us with the algorithm, helps you find more great hockey content just like Locked on Mammoth. And tell your friends, have them jump in here. One thing I did want to address, Robyn, before we get to Kesselring and Doan. Look, JJ Peterka, again, talking to my buddies in Buffalo and the media and the guys who have watched him play night in and night out, he's a defensive liability. Mm-hmm. Let's just go ahead and say that. He's 23. He wants to score goals. He wants to put up points. He's not much of a back checker. So no. Is he going to learn that? I don't know. No, there's not going to be much defensive responsibility there until it's coached into him. He's going to have to learn to play the game that way, or you have to learn to manage around the fact that he does not currently play the game that way. So yeah. I have no illusions about that, Robyn. They're going to have to either get him on board or put him with some defensively responsible people.
You really have to play that smart, and you have to understand that. And I think that's kind of what's going to be. I mean, it's going to be important, that's for sure, to see who they pair up with, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit here. And we all know we all know what we're going to get with that. The ideal aspect is he does get coached. I mean, Utah's coaching has been known to help some people. Some people kind of grow and kind of find themselves. But if JJ Peterka really is that defensive liability that everyone says, and it's just is going to give you a headache, you'll have to just manage your way around that. Like you said, pair him up with somebody who is a lot more defensively sound. Or maybe you focus on the minutes, maybe on the power play where you have more time in your offensive zone. Those are the kind of decisions that goes into Andre Tourigny and assistant coaching staff.
And so that's why, to turn this around to talk about what we gave up, Doan and Kesselring. I'm going to start with Doan. Doan was a sentimental pick, loved in Arizona, especially because, his dad was the face of the franchise forever. So I think there's a lot of heartfelt emotion and ties those heartstrings to Josh Doan. But Robyn, the reality is, hadn't cracked the lineup for a full NHL year yet. Was really a fourth line guy, sometimes up to the third line, might have filled in a little bit higher when injuries hit. Hadn't really developed on that potential yet. And I think that is kind of where Doan projects as a bottom six forward for me. And just really hadn't found a way into the Utah lineup yet. And when you're not really cracking the lineup on a regular basis on a non-playoff team, that's not the best indication for me, even though I know he still has time to develop.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to point out that, Utah had a lot of just instability overall, like in terms of a lot of the roster for the course of the season. So, I mean, it's hard to really judge what kind of season Josh Doan really could have had. But you're right. I think at the beginning point is, he was originally drafted by the Arizona Coyotes as a huge sentimental pick. I mean, he was drafted in the second round, so surely had some talent and was there. But really, the embodiment of a kind of player like him is a really heart and soul guy who really who just loves the game of hockey, and kind of one of those against all odds kinds of players almost. And Arizona fans, I'm speaking to a lot of these Arizona fans who can say this. And I think I had somebody who, tell this to me. That Josh Doan, has gone down previously. Now that he went from Utah and now gone over to Buffalo, but the first, last, and only player to have been born, raised in Arizona while also playing for the ASU Sun Devils, the Tucson Roadrunners, and the Arizona Coyotes. So he is that is true Arizona for him right there. Yeah. So there's a lot of connection there. And I feel like someone actually asked the question, is does this trade happen if Utah didn't move to Utah, right? If they were still Arizona. And I mean, and I don't know what to tell you if that's the case, because I mean, honestly, maybe. I mean, you can't turn down a deal like this, but there still is that emotional connection, at least on the fan perspective, that would stand the right if that were to happen.
You know, the immediate thought I had about when somebody asked that question about would they trade him if they're still in Arizona was Patrick Waugh would never get traded to the Quebec Nordiques from the Montreal Canadiens, but because Quebec moved to Colorado and became the Avalanche, they could trade him there. So that trade happened because the Nordiques moved and became the Avalanche. So I guess you never know, but maybe not. Maybe that trade wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's really a woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of thing. You take a look. It's you can't really predict hindsight. You just take a look at what things could have been. But like I said, I love Josh Doan. I mean, I had interviewed him a couple times when he was down at the Tucson Roadrunners, and I was still not necessarily full time, but I was doing a lot of Tucson coverage at the time. Just genuine good human being, and I'll say this: I wish him the best of luck, no matter where he is playing hockey. Yep. And to the Donhers, I know, like, I want to speak to you. I know you guys feel the same way. Like, you guys are probably, I know you're heartbroken. He's not going to be wearing a Utah Mammoth jersey or a Utah jersey at all anymore. But you can still carry his legacy with you. You can still share the love. Look, I don't mind if you guys are just still root for him, even though he's plays for another team. I mean, so many people are out there for that. I love that, and I love that you guys do that. You're all there, and you're in it together.
Yes, absolutely. Also, real quick on Kesselring, because I want to get to these line combos. Kesselring, right shot, big physical guy, wildly inconsistent for me. Could be careless with the puck. Just the mental side of the game, I would have liked to have seen been stronger. I have no qualms about Kesselring standing up for teammates, playing a physical game. I loved it. But the Mammoth are very deep on defense, and they have some pretty good options on the right side. And Kesselring is going to go to Buffalo and be on the 3-4 pair probably. But in Utah, he's on the 5-6. And that's if Maverick Lamoureux does not make the team out of camp this year. And if so, he becomes the 7th defenseman. It's
such a packed defense. And I will say, Tom, I think with how well Nick DeSimone played last year, with Dmitry Shimashev coming in, and a number of things, like, it's just so hard to see what kind of role Michael Kesselring could have played on this next defense. So, and look, I have high hopes, but when it's that packed, you can only do so much. I mean, you can't have everybody. You can't have everybody for the sake of saying, oh, what if this happens, or what if that happens, like last year, right? You don't predict that happening, so they kind of add more players. And it kind of becomes packed towards the end of the season because they come back from being injured. Now what do you do?
And once again, today, Bill Armstrong at that availability made it pretty clear that both Simashev and Boot are going to be given every single chance. 99% they're going to be on that roster opening night. So you got to make room for those guys. So a 2-for-1 of players who were getting longer and longer odds to actually stick. I think this is a great trade because of that. So, Robyn, let's take a look at the line combos that we kind of took a look at here. And we didn't factor in, we'll talk about defense here in just a moment, but tried to factor in, okay, where are you going to put these players? So Peterka is a left side guy. I would love to see this Peterka, Cooley, Keller combo, which means Hayton, Gunther, and potentially Boot on your second line, which moves Schmaltz down to the third line. That's crazy. And this is what I'm talking about. The trickle effect of the depth of making these moves.
There really is a lot. And I think that's too, and again, this is just kind of we're spitballing, figuring out in initial thought, top of our head, this is how we would like to see things, maybe where things can be, Tom. But you're right. There's a little bit of trickle down because, like, yeah, we'd like to see a top 6 like that. But having Schmaltz and Krause and, players who had previously in a top 6 role, now moving down to middle 6, third line roles. I mean, that really says something about the depth of this team.
And Scott made the comment earlier about Bukestad and Carconi likely gone July 1st. No, they're gone. Those guys are out. And you'll notice one other name who is not included in this lineup is Matthias Michelli. I really feel like Michelli has probably played his last game in a Mammoth uniform. And that's why, going back to what Bill Armstrong said earlier, he may not be done making moves. Michelli could be part of moves coming up here at the draft. So keep that in mind as well. Robyn, the other thing I wanted to point out is Schmaltz, we moved down to the third line, but Peterka's young, Boot is younger. So that's not to say that that left side doesn't shift and Schmaltz could go all the way back up to the top line.
It is easily able to be changed. And again, because of the youth, because if Peterka is shown to be the defensive liability, as people says he is, and maybe he doesn't go well, doesn't gel well with Cooley or Keller, yeah, you move things around. Maybe Boot goes up, maybe Schmaltz goes up. A lot of things can change. And I think, those again are the decisions that we see that Andre Tourney makes every single day. There's a lot of shifts that happen when he sees maybe chemistry isn't going in, maybe this player isn't developing the way they thought. So it's like, okay, I'm going to cut some of your minutes, so you're going to go down to the third line or whatever it might be. Those are some hard decisions to make.
It really will be, but it's a good problem to have. And then just defensively, the top four doesn't change. It's the same as it was last year. It's Sergachev, Durzi, and then you've got Mata and Marino. That 5-6 pair. So Cole signed for one more year. DeSimone signed for one more year. Like I said earlier, maybe Lamoureux makes the team out of training camp, or maybe he's the 7th D. But then Simashev could be the 7th D, but could be in that lineup somewhere, and DeSimone could be the 7th D. So there's a lot of options on the defense.
I do want to address this real quick, and again, some of you guys might absolutely hate this when I address this as a question, but Paula asked the questions, how did Doan and Kesselring find out? Did they get a call beforehand letting them know they will be missed? Yes, they will be missed. I'm going to hate to burst some of you guys' bubbles because it's really unfortunate, and I feel like it's unfair to a lot of these players, but they don't get a call ahead of time for the most part. They will get a call when it's finalized. They'll be let know, but when they first find out, they're finding out at the same time we're finding out via Twitter. And it's like, imagine being that player, Tom. I could not. Right. To me, that's, I think, the heartbreaking part. Like, I can imagine being on either one of them side, figuring out, oh, am I gone? Then at that point, they're probably reaching out, trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, if they can, the GM will get to the player before the media.
Yeah, they will try, but
we live in this crazy instant. Yeah, it's just everybody wants to pump out the info and be right. Like Saravalli's on it, and then the next thing you know, Frege is weighing in, and all of a sudden everybody's clicking all their sources into place, and deals get announced before they're announced. That's the world we live in now.
Yeah, and it sucks if you're that kind of player who's on the other side, right? I mean, I think someone posted it on through other social media accounts and saying, hey, did you see JJ Peterka's Instagram? He's out having his off-season just experience over in Greece, and he's probably found out the trade while he's on a boat in Greece.
Yeah,
that's the NHL.
Yeah, it is. That's all sports. Yeah,
that's sports.
That's all sports. Guys find out where they're going through their buddies calling them and go, hey man, did you see the Instagram, Twitter, whatever post? No, they probably did not see it until somebody brought it to their attention. So that's the unfortunate part of it. All right. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to get to here, Robyn. We looked at the lines. So the draft is next tomorrow night. We're just about 24 hours away. Mm-hmm. Does this change Utah's draft strategy really, or are they looking at kind of, I mean, they're keeping the options open. That's always been the strategy, right?
I mean, that has always been the strategy. I mean, Bill Armstrong was open about it in the media availability where he said he's still looking at all the options, and that includes trading up or down, right? Or actually, making a selection in that pick, who's available in that one. And again, I think they like to keep their cards close. Everyone's saying, oh, we don't know who they're going to pick. But we already know who they had dinner with back in the combine. I mean, we can at least give yourselves that rough estimate, right? It's like, okay, James Hagan is on that list, but who knows? Maybe he gets picked number 3. So what do you got? Oh, Porter Martone or Caleb Desnoyers. Who's going to be the better fit for this club? Caleb Denoyer didn't even get dinner, but hey, I know he's on that list.
He is on that list. He wasn't at the combine because of his wrist injuries, which we talked about last show, and actually injuries to both wrists since November, to me, made it an even more impressive season that he gutted through it for 5 months. Might not be readily available to make that jump. He might be thinking about college, might be thinking about going back to Moncton, where they've said they're going to make him captain next year. So, and that's the other thing, right, Robyn, is to remind everybody, draft picks very rarely are going to be in the lineup this year or even next year. It's
I don't know how many times. I have no idea how many times, Tom, I have said those words, whether it's on this show or when I'm, doing guest insider work with ESPN 700 in Salt Lake City, where I tell them, like, you got to remember, like, very rarely, unless we're talking generational talent, will a pick in the early first round make it to an NHL roster immediately. And again, we're talking generational talent. Your Macklin Celebrini, Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, however far you want to go back, right?
Yeah.
Those are generational talents. Very rarely does outside of those kinds of players. Maybe in year 2 or 3. But that's also being optimistic. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because it's all about developing these players and making sure that they get to closer to that ceiling that we want them to be before they make it in, or close to the floor you want them to be before they make it in.
Absolutely. You know what, Robyn, in wrapping it up, I think that this comment sums it up really well for Mammoth fans. Heart is hurting, but my brain is excited.
There you go. I mean, look, and I get it. 100%. And that is sports. I cannot tell you how many times as a sports fan, no matter what sport I'm talking about, have I dealt with a player, one of my favorite players, on their way out from one of my favorite teams, and in my heart, it sucks. I feel heartbroken, but in my head, I'm like, okay, but future of this team. It's good for this team. Let me tell myself it's good for this team.
Yeah. It's understandable, but these sometimes are sacrifices that are necessary to win. And look at teams that win Stanley Cups, right? Last year, Florida won and had to give up some pretty darn good players. And they're going to have to do it again this summer in order to try to keep some of those other pretty darn good players. The Blackhawks were constantly shedding people during their, I dare say, dynastic run where they won those 3 cups in 5 years. It's the nature of the beast. Any sport you've got a salary cap, you're going to lose players over time. And that's just how it goes. And so, that's, as we've been saying, let Bill cook. I've been very impressed with the job he's doing building this team, and more so than a lot of other NHL GMs right now, it's slow and steady progress and making gains where you can. And Robyn, I don't say this much, but I've been pretty impressed with the maneuvers of this front office. I really like where they're going. And
you're absolutely right. I mean, I was asked this question, and I kind of just provided my analysis too. I think it was in the spaces, and I was pretty much saying, look, I've got a chance to take a look at what Bill Armstrong's been doing as a whole, even pre-Utah Mammoth, talking pre-Utah as a whole, talking even the Arizona Coyotes, when he became the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes to replace the then outgoing general manager, John Chayka. Tom, it is a night and day difference what Bill Armstrong is doing to this franchise versus what John Chayka did to the Arizona Coyotes. It is beyond a night and day difference.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So, Robyn, as we wrap things up, final thoughts on the trade here on the eve of the draft.
I just got to say, 100%, I am with all those, like that comment that you shared with us earlier, Tom. Yes, I know a lot of you guys, your hearts might be hurting, but you're all excited. But if you're not yet, try to be as excited as you can. JJ Peterka is going to be a phenomenal player for this team. It's a really good acquisition. Utah's not done. Remember, this team wants to be competing for a playoff spot next year. If you're not on the bandwagon yet, come join us now. It's a good time to be on the Utah Mammoth bandwagon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to when this team takes to the ice and when they make their preseason debut at a renovated Delta Center. looking forward to that as well. So that's going to be an awful lot of fun. In the meantime, if you want to reach out to us on social media, our handles are down there below where you can find us. But also, Robyn, where can they find us on social media for the show accounts?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have it below my name up on my side of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's at Locked On Mammoth. Once again, at Locked On Mammoth. And that's absolutely everywhere, whether it's on Twitter or X, whatever you do want to call it, on Instagram, Threads, or Blue Sky, all there at Locked On Mammoth. You can find me personally, primarily mostly active on Twitter, at Robyn_Leano.
It'll always be Twitter to me, at Callahan on air on Twitter, and on Blue Sky, I'm at Tom Talks. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We will be back at you again here. I mean, the first round of the draft is going to be super exciting on a Friday night. Can't wait to see what's going to happen for the Utah Mammoth, and we will definitely have some breaking reaction depending on what happens, what direction things go. And then, of course, we will follow it all up with a complete draft wrap-up as well. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of Locked On Mammoth.